Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Introspection. I'm your host, Amy Lindner Lesser, and today we're going international. I believe my guest is the first international guest that we've had, and I'm really excited to bring her on. Linda Yetman is a PhD nurse, and she is from Canada. She's a nurse psychotherapist and a transformational coach practitioner with a deep passion for guiding individuals through personal and professional life stressors and transitions. Using her neuroscience nursing experience and a holistic approach, Linda combines several modalities, including Dreamwork, to help individuals gain a deeper understanding of themselves through self-discovery and personal growth. And I can tell you, Linda has helped me look at least one of my dreams to figure out what the heck it meant. And it was nothing that I thought of. Welcome to Introspection, the podcast about moving from grief to growth. I'm Amy Lindner Lesser, your host. Introspection started out as a podcast about hospitality, innkeeping, and innkeepers. After about a year, I realized that my life and interests have morphed from hospitality to helping others navigate from grief and loss to growth and living. In this new version of Introspection, I will be talking about my personal experiences with loss, and there are quite a few, what I've learned along the way through my professional training, as well as from my coaching experiences. I'll also be bringing in guests to share interesting ideas. So grab a beverage, find a comfy place, take a deep breath, and listen in. So help me in welcoming Linda and having our first international podcast. Good morning.
Hi, Amy. Thank you so much. I didn't know I was going to be classified as international. That's exciting. Yeah. Even though we're just across the border. Yeah. I'm very, very pleased to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
You're very close. However, since your little bio said Canadian, I was like, okay, we'll talk about that. My younger daughter used to love the fact that she would say, people from Canada were from, wait a minute, now I can't think of it. Canadia. It was Canadia or Canada because she knew of Canadians.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Canadians. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, we met during a networking group with a coach that I work with, and I believe that you're going to be working with also. And I was fascinated that you do a lot of dream analysis. And one of the first things that I mentioned to you was that after my husband passed away, I wasn't dreaming. I'm sure I was, I just couldn't remember them. And talking to other widows, I found that it's not uncommon that going through a trauma like that we stop dreaming both daydreams. I couldn't think about my future because I was so stuck where I was and in the grief. And I also couldn't remember any nighttime dreams. And so I was really curious from you if this has been your experience also and what you can share.
So I'll tell you and your audience a little bit about how I became interested in the dream work and moved, incorporate that into my practice. So as Amy said in the introduction, I'm a neuroscience nurse by background. So when I graduated in 1976 with my diploma, my first nursing where I practiced was in neurosurgery. So a lot of patients will be recovering from neurological trauma or, neurological surgeries for different conditions. And I was always fascinated by the brain anyway. But the big piece was as patients were recovering, these images that they would speak about or they would see. And some people would say, they're hallucinating. But I always felt there was something different with how they were expressing this. So in any event, that was probably, just becoming aware of patients' recovery. And then several years later, I went to a workshop on dream interpretation. It was just like a 2-hour thing that was offered by a therapist in the community where I was. And that was for me, that was it. So that's many years ago. And after that workshop, I started to record my dreams, which is one thing I'd like to speak about later. But with I kept a dream journal for 3 years at that particular time. And I remember sitting down and looking through the dreams, and the patterns just jumped out at me about, unhealthy patterns that I was in at the time, behaviors and that. And I really started on the journey of self-awareness and self-discovery using my dreams, right? As a process. So that's a little bit about my, how I started in the dream world. Then, as I moved into coaching and nurse psychotherapy, I started to study it in more depth. And I've done, several studies in it. And more recently, there's a technique called focusing. And this is one that I'm really drawn to. And that's when you and I met, it was going deeper. And it's a technique that's used. So a caveat that I'd like to say, Amy, is that, there's many ways of approaching dreams, there's different schools of thought. There's all kinds of books and literature and that on dreams. But it is becoming an evidence-informed practice now for people, right? There's a lot of research being done with veterans, post-traumatic stress disorder, like different, especially certain populations. And so it is an evidence-informed practice now. So, where some people think it's woo-woo or, what does it mean? But it has advanced over the years. And my clients come in to a session and, very clear that this is what the dream means, but there's a process, right? There's a process about uncovering and, going deeper with the dreams. So back to your, your question about working with people experiencing grief, right? And that's a highly specialized area. And obviously, I've had clients who have had grief and used their dreams to work through it. So it's one modality. It doesn't work for everybody, right? And it's a practice, it's a discipline, to be able to, how do you recall dreams? When you said, I don't recall you are dreaming, but the discipline and the practice about establishing how can I start to recall my dreams, right?
Do you find that maybe the inability to recall dreams could be a protective mechanism?
Absolutely, it could be. But the more that I study it and move into it is about that intention, about bringing that into your self-awareness and having that intention about, if I'm trying to work through something or I'm not clear on an answer, how do I move through it? Now, the other thing, this is a really good question, Amy, because the other thing about dreams, some people perceive that dreams have to be a certain way, and that it's involving these people and whatever. And the dreams, the way that I'd like to put this is that sometimes you can't recall the dream, but you may wake up with some kind of a feeling and not knowing, right? What is this? That could be, I can't say it is, but it could be, something that you were dreaming. So you can work with somebody who can look at that, that feeling and, and explore that. It could also be, I woke up and it was a snippet of something. Like, I saw a light bulb. Now, what does that mean, right? But if it's the first recall that you have, whether it's a feeling or a snippet of something, that is important to capture if you want to start to recall your dreams. Yeah.
I know that during the day I will often nap. I have a cat who keeps me up half my nights. So, when I'm away from him, I will sometimes take a cat nap of about 15 minutes. And if there's something that I'm thinking about during the day or something that I'm not sure of, I will often say to myself, whatever that is. And then when I fall asleep, I find that I've actually given myself permission maybe to dream about that. And then when I wake up, the answer comes to me.
Yeah. See, this is now, is that joined a daydreaming? Is that what you're referring? Yeah. Yeah. This is, it's not something that I have been able to do myself about the daydreaming, but this is, from what and I've read something, on one of my calendars that I have, I read those calendars every day, and it said something about, don't dismiss the daydreams, because people, we do think, okay, dreams during the night. But no, it's very important to pay attention. Like if you do have a nap, right? See, and a lot of times too, napping during the day, when you said give yourself permission to really go deep, to relax, right? There's a reason why many cultures have that afternoon, time out, right? To be able to relax. Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up about the daydreaming. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about the journaling?
Sure, absolutely. So the journaling, so one way to do this is to have, a small notebook or something fancy, whatever, is appealing to you, and a pen by your bed. And, sometimes people will have something that you can associate. Remember, because it's the mind, but it's also your brain. So sometimes I'll say to clients, like, do you have a glass of water at your bed? Or, put one there so that when you see that, you'll create an association. Okay, did I dream? What was the dream? So when you wake up, now everybody's different, Amy. Like some people will say, give yourself a few minutes when you wake up and, take your time. That's not life for everybody. Most people are jumping out of bed to get going, right? But if you can, just a couple of words to, if you ask yourself, did I dream? What did I dream? And then to write down, what is coming to your mind then. So in the dream journal, the date. Now, one important thing that I think it's important is to give a title to your dream. Right? So that you might not have time to do that in the morning. If you can, great. But then, when you go back and you write, and you probably will mention about the ebook later, and there's some pointers about this, but always write the dream in the present tense as if it's happening now, right? So, I am in the bedroom with my dog, I am walking down the street, whatever that might be. And then as much as you can to describe, it's descriptive, right? So, and if you can, to bring in the senses, I saw something that jumped out at me. I felt this way. So you're writing your experience in a descriptive way. So it is important to give it a title, a date, and the title. Now, one of the things I recommend to clients, if they can, is if you have a journal, I should have had one here. So you can write down the descriptor on one page, and then the other page, so you open it up, and sometimes you can write, what is this evoking? Especially if you're going to work with a coach or a therapist with it, to be able to describe how you're feeling about reading it. So that's, a couple of things. So have it close by, a book and a journal and a pen. And if you feel you're not remembering, then you could place something that will cue you when you wake up, like you see a glass of water, or it could be, a little, a crystal or something that will say, oh, did I dream? Because that might cue you to say, yes, I did. And even if it's a feeling, I woke up and I just had this sick feeling in my stomach, or I woke up and I was really feeling great, or I woke up and I felt sad. Even if it's a feeling, put that down. And then, or if it's just a snippet, I woke up and, I saw a deer running across outside the yard, something, whatever it is, that snippet, and then put it in the journal.
I have a lot of clients who, when I suggest journaling other things, are like, I don't like writing. I don't want to write. So I've said to them, then grab your phone and have a, a dictation app on there and talk to your phone.
Yeah. So absolutely, Amy. The main thing is that when we write, like even with journaling, the practice of journaling, not necessarily for dream work, but the practice of journaling, there is the processing that goes in between the brain, the coordination, the hand, the thinking, the information processing. That's a neuroscience perspective. As you know, it does help us to process a little bit more. And but some people, everybody is so technologically inclined now. So I would say for anybody that's starting out, however you can capture your thinking, right? Whether it's in the phone or bullet form, whatever way, if you're interested in it. But trying to do what you can. And it also depends on how much you want to explore. There's lots of books on how can you represent your dreams. So sometimes when I work with clients, they can't write for whatever reason. They can't write about their dreams. But what they could do is they could draw, right? Or they can make a collage, right? Some people will write a poem. Some people will write a story from the journaling. Some people will paint. It's really amazing. And that creative expression of whatever form, then that's what can be used, right, to work with the client.
I think that's a great reminder that, for somebody who's had a stroke, and maybe, they're right-handed and it was that hand, and so they can't write anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. 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 And that's a really important point, Amy, because people, there's different ways of expression, right? So what works for one person, right, may not work for somebody else, but offer people options, right? The other thing that I just want to mention is about the benefits of Dreamwork in groups. So this is a very interesting concept, and I've been part of dream groups. I facilitated dream groups, and it's so rich because you get to hear other people's dreams and perspectives. The facilitator, the dream coach, is working with that. There's very strict rules around, the conversation. There's a confidentiality and all that, but there's, this is your dream. Like, this is Amy's dream. So, there's certain ways of working with the group. So, people offer, if this is one of the ground rules, so, one of the ground rules might be everybody might offer an observation, but this is Amy's dream. So there's rules about how do you present your perspective. But it's a very rich way of experiencing dream work and learning about the process. Yeah.
The rules have to be very explicit and very clear, because someone is opening themselves up and opening up the things that they don't say to themselves even during the day, because these are coming out of their subconscious.
Exactly, Amy, exactly. And that vulnerability, it's that witnessing the vulnerability and acknowledging, this person is, like you said, opening up. And sometimes the person is not even aware, like, where did this come from? Like, where did it come from? Or in disbelief, like, I can't believe I just said that this is what I dreamt, right? And so, and then processing. It's a very vulnerable process. I think it is, for people to want to work with their dreams. And it goes to a depth. And the other thing for me, a large number of my client base are nurses. So especially during COVID and all that, the impact of the work environments on people, and, working with their dreams, and how it can be used to raise people's self-awareness, but also about their own self-care needs. So this is a huge huge area that I work with nurses and other healthcare professionals. Yeah, with the Dreamwork.
Nurses and women in general
Women in general is not, yeah, and I
are not good at self-care.
not good at self-care. In my client base are women, and it has nothing to do with discounting males or any of that. But that's my experience. My whole working career has been mostly women. And also, there's certain things that men only want to share with men in groups, emotional issues. Some men are only vulnerable with other men, and women the same way. It's about that safety factor.
It is fascinating. Most of my clients are women. And I say that, and that's who I, market and tell about my services, because as a woman, I identify with women. However, some of my most fascinating and most open and revealing clients have been men. And, when I find a man who's willing to open up to me, it's great, because I can give him a perspective that he hasn't seen, and he can give me a perspective that I hadn't thought of.
Absolutely. And it goes down to, as in most, therapeutic approaches, is that creating that safety, the psychological safety, the emotional safety, and that trust, right? And but for me, I work mostly with women. Those are for whatever reason, that's who my clients are.
Well, I think it's, nursing has been
female dominated.
It's changing, but it is still female dominated. And, I was a social worker. Social work is also mostly women.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And because of that, and because women are raised, unfortunately, to care for everybody before themselves, there's a need there. There's a need to boost our self-esteem and our self-care.
Self-care, yeah. And I know it's a buzzword now, to self-care, but I haven't come up with another phrase to replace it. But it's it's so needed in terms of looking after ourselves. And this, again, to go back to the dream work, sometimes these are where the gaps can be highlighted. What's the dream saying about this? The symbology and the symbols in dreams, again, what does it mean? It's a personal meaning, right? When you different symbols or different, somebody might dream, about a room in a house. Well, what does that room connotate? What does that mean? What's it symbolic of?
And for somebody else, it would be completely different.
Exactly. And that's why it's not a cookie cutter approach, right? We can give guidelines, but it's so personal and so deep and so vulnerable.
Life quakes or life transitions and the aftershocks that follow are something we all experience. A life quake can stem from the heartbreaking grief that arises from the loss of a loved one, or the disorientation felt when life suddenly shifts due to the loss of a job, relationship, identity, or health challenge. Learning to navigate these transitions with mindfulness, grace, and self-compassion is the key to finding your way back to joy, happiness, and inner peace. Advanced Grief Recovery Method Specialist and Certified Life Transition Coach Amy Lindner Lesser, MSW, expertly supports clients to navigate their life quakes and transitions with warmth, kindness, and grace. Learning to accept support as you navigate your way through the aftershocks is one of the most powerful gifts you can give yourself. Learn more at introspection.com. That's introspection.com.
I think it's fascinating that multiple people can dream about the same object, if you will, and mean completely different things to them. I remember seeing a book years ago, Dream Interpretations, and it was like, if you dream about a house, it means a house, or it means a family, or whatever. So that's really both.
Yeah. So the teachers that I've studied with, say, dream dictionaries. This is one thing, that most people have, if you're interested in this, most people have a dream dictionary on their shelves. But one of the things they say, they have a place. However, do not rely on, what it says. Or people tend to go to the internet, right? I mean, when you think about, because dreams are universal, all cultures have a perspective on dreams, right? And that's the other important thing, objects or symbols or signs that are in, a dream in one culture, right? May not be represented differently in another culture. But it's through that exploration and the questioning and the focusing, and also paying attention to what is being evoked in the person from a feeling perspective. What does this, feel like? And so it's very, very cultural perspective, and individual perspective. If you go back to biblical times or, again, very early cultures, there was a lot of weight placed on dreams and, representation, decision making, right? And, one of my teachers had studied dreams from a Greek mythology, a Greek perspective. And I learned so much at the time about, people would go and they would go to these sleep chambers and, they might, use for 3 days at a time in order to process and what was happening and how were they going to make these big decisions, or they were looking for answers, for personal reasons and that. So it's been around for millennia. And then, the different theories that have evolved, Sigmund Freud is basically who started ball rolling more recently, and then Jungian perspective. But now we're moving into the research part of it, like the neuroscience research on the REM state, or, people having nightmares or night terrors, right? And, that research that's giving us answers now to what is lying in the unconscious or subconscious.
Do you have any advice or recommendations for people who are grieving, as far as either other than a journal, which if they're not dreaming, then there's nothing to put in, or they're not aware of their dreaming, there's nothing to put in the journal. Is anything to help them to figure out dreaming? And
Right. I think it's very personal. The grief process is very personal. And I do believe that dream work can be a modality. I do believe that for people who are grieving. And, like any transition that people are going through, grief is a transition and it's timeless. We don't know. This is personal to me, Amy. I don't believe that there's a timeline for grief. I think that it's, it waxes and wanes, put it that way. And I think that grief or using dream work, if it's, and it's not that every dream, if somebody's in a grieving process, not every dream is going to be reflective of, how does this relate to my grief? But it's only through the exploration, is there a correlation, or what does it mean? I think it's another process. Yeah.
I think what you just said was such a diamond, is that not every dream, even if you're in the deepest part of grief, is going to help you or be about the grief. And what it says to me, and I hope that our viewers and our listeners will take note of this, is that we are capable of thinking and processing more than the grief. The grief may be taking over our waking hours, but in our sleeping hours, we're doing other things. And I think what it's telling us is that there's room in our life to go ahead and think other things, add other things, because you are alive. And, there's a loss. It will continue with you until you stop breathing. It'll come and go. And as you said, there is There's no right way to grieve. There's no route. You can't follow a GPS because the directions for me are different from the directions for you. I did a podcast on debunking Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief because they were never intended to be for the griever. That we're all different, and every loss we experience, every life transition, as I call them, every life quake, is gonna be different. We are gonna respond and react in different ways.
Amy, this is, I mean, to me, you've succinctly paraphrased a lot of, what we've been speaking about. The other thing I've always said is that our dreams are our teachers. They are our teachers, and so in terms of the application to grief work, I mean, my opinion only, humbly, is that, what are the dreams teaching us about our grief? What is it, that you are to learn, if that's your perspective. For some people, I absolutely know, dreams are very literal, but they can be used, from a teaching perspective.
I know that you have an ebook to share with our audience, and that can be found on your website.
LindaYetmanCoaching.com.
Coaching.
I'll give you the
Don't
link.
forget the coaching like I just did. I took a quick look at it and now have to spend some time reading it. It's very well written, in-depth discussion about the types of dreams and using the dreams.
Thank you, Amy. And there's some references in the back. There's for people to explore further. I think it's good to have other, have references that are there. But yes, anybody will be welcome to this for sure to download it. Yeah.
And I encourage everyone to do download it and to reach out to Linda if you would like to talk about working with her or for referrals. Know that you are not alone in your grief if you can't remember dreams, or if you don't have any daydreams or future dreams. Sometimes we get so bogged down with the heaviness of where we are in the present that we can't think past that.
And also, if nothing else from our discussion, Amy, if people take away, how can I use my dreams to teach me, right? Like they are there for, it may not be clear, in the moment when you wake up, but sometimes, if you work with somebody, it'll help demystify. That's the title of the ebook, right? Demystify your dreams. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be complicated. There's a process to it. Yeah.
We had a very quick chat before we started recording. And one of the things that Linda reminded me of is that just because we dream something, it doesn't mean it has anything to do with the actual thing that we're dreaming. So if you have a scary dream, it doesn't mean that there's nothing real in, that it's saying it's going to happen, unless you happen to be a clairvoyant person, which is another story.
Yeah, there is a category of dreams called precognitive, right? And, like sometimes, is this going to happen? Is this going to happen? And I mean, there's really no way. I did have a friend one time who approached me. She wanted to know about, she had this dream. And when we processed it, she was making a decision to enter into a project that was riddled. It was really going to be a very horrendous experience for her. And, when we looked back on it, I think, there's too much detail to go into now, but I think some of the symbols that were in that dream were clear. But the only way to know the application for you is to record it as much as you can. And then, work with someone to figure it out. But most people will definitely take it very literal, right? So like if I dream about you tonight, right? well, it's because I did a podcast with Amy. Well, no, so, I mean, one question is, when you dream about people that what aspect of that person, what quality, right, is, being represented back to you. And sometimes you don't like the answer because sometimes people in your dreams, right? Oh, I'm not like that. I don't have any of their qualities. Well, if you're honest.
And sometimes things come up because they're what's foremost or front in your mind. So if you were to dream about me, it could be because we just did the podcast. So I'm the person who happens to show up in the dream representing something that has absolutely nothing to do with me.
And through the questioning, see, Amy, this is, I'm so glad, I know we have to go, but I'm so glad you brought that point up. But through the questioning, for me now in my work, right, like, is there something that I need to explore about dream work, to apply to a certain group? Like, I know you do a lot of the coaching and that around grief work and that. But, like, what is important? What's the piece, right, that resonates with me? So, it's about going deeper, right? It's about going deeper. But it's hard for people, Amy, to let go of that literal piece, right? It's a tough one. Yeah.
Well, we want answers. We don't like unanswered questions. And I think our minds therefore go to the easiest way.
And the safest. And the safest way, because we're all vulnerable. So, it's safe to accept that, right? It's like, oh yeah, so that's what it was about. And then but when people go, and you're working with, especially in a group situation, it's like, oh my, where did that come from? And so the mind the brain and the mind is fascinating to me, just fascinating. Yeah.
And I know you've done a lot of research too, that you don't just act as a psychotherapist.
No, I have been in the research world, not necessarily with the dreams per se, but one of my mentors, Dr. Leslie Ellis, she's one of the forerunners now, and her references are in the ebook. And she's doing a lot of research to bring the evidence about the impact of dreams. Yeah, for sure.
Evidence-based is essential and is wonderful. And it doesn't negate that woo may be true.
Well, somebody said to me one time, don't poo-poo the woo-woo. And it's true, I mean, it has to be balanced. Hey, Amy, it's like, well, for me, I have to say, okay, what is the evidence behind this, But I mean, we're seeing, so many modalities now that are being helpful to people. And Dreamwork is one of them. Whereas a lot of people will say, oh, this is woo-woo. But not for a lot of other people. It's been very, very helpful. Yeah.
The stuff that we see as woo-woo is stuff that we just don't have enough research to back up, because we were saying that about all kinds of things. And I think back to the Jewish Bible. There's a prayer that the more religious, more practicing Jews say in the morning, the men. And there were things like, thank God that the orifices that are supposed to open when they're supposed to, and close when they're supposed to. That, basically, like, thank God that I can open my mouth, I can void, my heart's beating as it should. And when you think about that, there's a knowledge that is so advanced for that day and age, before we had what we call science.
Amy, I mean, that's a whole other conversation, but, I'm working with a neuroscientist right now in a course, and, we're looking at the relationship between gut health and the brain. Okay. Or, how many neurotransmitters, are located. I mean, I grew up in the era where neurotransmitters were all in the brain, like this is, but now the research is telling us, right? I mean, it's not just the brain anymore. So when I talk to cardiac nurses, I say, well, I come from the land of the other ventricles, and they're, of course, the heart ventricles, and it's like, but it's the heart now. I mean, it's, when you think about neurotrans and the gut health, this is, and this is all advancements, right?
So I think what that's telling us is that what we don't understand, we call woo. And in 100 years, when people who are living then are going to be like, we know this, we've proven this.
Yeah, exactly. Be open, and be curious. That's the other thing, right? And I think that's where some of my passion for dream. It's like the curiosity, because this is a person who is, saying this is what this, and recalling, right, the dream, and what can this, for me, right, as a nurse psychotherapist and a coach, is like, how can this be meaningful for this person's life, to help them, to support them.
I think that's a great way for us to end, by saying, ask questions.
Ask questions and be curious.
Ask the questions of yourself, or talk to your dream. What was it that you wanted to let me know?
Well, actually, we'll go now, Amy, I know, but one of the things is, I'll ask a client, what does the dream want to tell you? Or what do you want to ask the dream, right? It's about asking the questions. Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Amy, thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. And everyone, to get the free e-guide, or to find out more about Linda, it's lindayetmancoaching.com.
Yeah.
And remember that you can make it a great day. It's up to you. Your way of thinking and perceiving is what will change the reality of the situation into something positive.
Absolutely.
So, love you all and appreciate you, and we'll see you next time. If you liked what you heard on this podcast and want to hear more, please follow us and tell your friends. You can also find me on Facebook at Amy Lindner Lesser, Grief to Growth Life Coaching, and on LinkedIn at Amy Lindner Lesser.